Okay, now it's time for a look at what's in today's papers with Erin Ogunkeye. Hi, Erin.
Hi, James.
So we're starting with the controversy surrounding those major power outages in Texas in particular. What are the papers saying about that massive windstorm?
Yeah, and they have had quite a bit to say about it today, but there's not much consensus about who or what is to blame. I'll start with the conservative paper, the Wall Street Journal, which in an opinion piece asks why several million Americans in the country's most energy-rich state have gone several days now without power or heat and with no end in sight. Well, this piece blames Texas's over-reliance on wind power that has left the grid more vulnerable to bad weather, I quote. The paper says half of the state's wind turbines froze last week, leaving natural gas and coal generators to cover up the supply gap, though they couldn't meet the demand. So the piece goes on to blame politicians from both parties, who the author says have pushed for subsidies for renewable energies, which have left the energy grid less stable and even forced some fossil fuel generators to shut down.
Okay, so that's the Wall Street Journal. What do other papers say is to blame for this unusually destructive storm?
Well, the New York Times says that wind farms cannot be the main cause of the blackout, noting that wind power only makes up some 7% of the state's total energy capacity this time of year. The paper saying instead that Texas's power system is simply not built or prepared for this year's cold temperatures, noting that local politicians have long been aware of that and have decided not to act to fix it.
Okay, you've been looking at the French press as well and increasing concern about cyber criminality here in France. Tell us more about that.
Yes, they are concerned about ransomware attacks in particular, which is on the cover of today's Le Monde paper. Now, ransomware are essentially viruses that make files and software unavailable until a hefty ransom is paid to unlock them. It means that in factories or even in hospitals, machines stop working. You can't access emails or telephones. At a hospital in France earlier this week, it meant that patients needed to be transferred to another hospital because their patient care information couldn't be accessed. Companies and public institutions obviously rely on computers and technology to operate. So this is a huge problem. Last year, Le Monde says these types of attacks against hospitals or businesses cost hundreds of millions of euros, with the paper adding that ransomware is now the main cyber threat posed to businesses and public institutions.
It's really incredible that they're targeting hospitals. Yeah. It just shows the level of unscrupulous behavior going on. Now, what are officials doing to confront the threat?
Well, that is the focus of today's Le Figaro paper, which also put a front page headline on the issue. Now, it's difficult for authorities to deal with this, James, because cyber criminals are mostly abroad, often in Russia and Eastern Europe, and they use Bitcoin increasingly, which makes it very difficult to track them. But President Emmanuel Macron is presenting a national strategy plan on Thursday on how to better protect the public and private sectors from these cyber attacks. That will include a $1 billion envelope of investments in the matter by 2025, and will also involve reinforcing the defense systems of public institutions by financing the development of new technologies and new solutions in partnership with research institutions and companies that are specialized in these types of issues.
The state is just playing catch up massively with a whole new range and genre of crime online. Now, finally, it seems a baby has been born from the first medical miracle of its kind here in France. Happy story. Tell us more.
Yes, it is exciting news for the medical community here in France, and it is on the cover page of Le Parisien. That is because baby Misha, who we see in the photo there, now 6 days old, was born from a mother who herself was born without a uterus. Well, she was able to give birth to Misha thanks to a uterine transplant from her own mother. And it is the first time that this has been done.
So her grandmother's uterus
exactly.
is how she grew up inside her mother. That's amazing.
Exactly. It is amazing. But as Le Parisien explains, James, it is an extremely complicated process. First, you have to surgically remove, of course, the uterus from the donor in a robotic surgery that lasts 7 hours. On the very same day, you then need to transplant the uterus into the recipient body, another surgery that takes 4 hours. And then you have to make sure that the recipient body accepts the transplanted organ, which doesn't always happen. If the body does accept it, you then put the embryo in, and that doesn't work in 60% of cases, which just, again, goes to say how much of a miracle it is that this baby was born. I will end by saying, James, that the transplanted uterus cannot stay in the recipient's body eternally. It can only be used for 2 pregnancies maximum, and once those pregnancies are finished, it must be removed.
Thank you for that, Erin. And a reminder to our viewers, you can catch up on this in the papers, in the press, and all previous episodes if you check out the dedicated page on our website, france24.com/EN in the press.